Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my incredibly late review for the Loki season finale. I just realized I'm wearing my Legend of Zelda shirt. This is about as close as I get to having a Loki shirt. This is my Legend of Zelda stuff. But I enjoyed this finale. I thought it was really good. It did pretty much what we wanted from both WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier, where it was like, okay, they had some stuff set up. It's like easy references. You got all this stuff going on. Let's see Doctor Strange and WandaVision. Didn't happen, which I do believe was because of the pandemic. So, ye old virus strikes again. Falcon and Winter Soldier. It's like, okay, there's a couple things here and there we might just see. There are just a couple of things where it's like, we might see some stuff. Nobody showed up. It was like, okay, they had Rhodey in the very beginning, which was cool. Which, there's a crazy story for anyone who didn't know. This is so random. It has nothing to do with Loki, but Don Cheadle got like an Emmy nomination for like the 30 seconds he was in that effing show, which is super weird and almost kind of effed up. Like the dude who was Isaiah Bradley was amazing, and he didn't get like a supporting actor nomination, but Don Cheadle are like, those 30 seconds, it got me, and it's so weird. It's so weird. But anyway, that's the thing that's happened. Loki was great. Loki did pretty much what people wanted to have happen, minus Mephisto, of course, but we actually got the character we figured we would get. And it's not exactly Kang, but they did bring the actor in. They got Jonathan Majors, like that door opens up, and it wasn't another version of Loki, which a lot of people thought. I even said that in my last review. And I think if we knew that this was going to have a second season, I think that would have made it easier. I think that's why they didn't tell anybody, like, yeah, there's definitely going to be a season 2, is because they knew if we were like, oh, they're going to make a season 2, of course Kane's going to be in it. Because had I known that, I would have been like, yeah, because like my whole thing was like, well, it's not going to be Kane, because just like, Falcon Winter Soldier, the power broker had to be someone we'd already seen. They can't just add a new character in and then it just ends, and then that's it. Because I'm like, it'll end, and then in 2.5 years we're gonna have Ant-Man Quantumanium. So it's like, that doesn't really work. Like, how are you gonna be like, it's Kang will return in like 2.5 years? So it wouldn't have made sense. So it's like, it was a genius idea to have people all assume it's just going to be 6 episodes. And so then it ends. And I was still like, dang, they just ended it there. And I thought, admittedly, even when it ended at that point, I was like, I don't know how this is going to go. Like, it just ends. And I'm like, that's really crazy with the Loki stuff. But I did assume that things would actually continue. Like, I thought it was going to be that. And then pretty much what we expect as far as like the multiverse of madness and all that stuff. I was like, oh, it'll probably carry over into that. And so I thought that was cool in itself. And then it was like, no, there's going to be a season 2, which I still think isn't going to come out, because Multiverse of Madness, I think, is early next year or something. So Loki's not coming out until after that, season 2. So I'm still very excited to see how it's going to play out, because I think it's going to go from the show to the movie and then kind of back to the show. So I'm very curious, because this is one of those moments where they're like, hey, if you want to only watch the movies, you're good to go, which they can still do. They can do some easy little recap stuff or whatever and be like, what the F happened? Somebody explains it in like 2.5 seconds. I killed a dude, multiverse, that's why we're here. They'll probably have 2.5 hours to explain all that. If they got Wanda coming in, they got to explain a bunch of stuff anyway. So they'll probably just kind of have all that wrapped into one nice paragraph of exposition, and we'll get all the answers anyway. But I like the way they handled it. It was really fun. I was like, okay. They got Kang, which I think in this case would kind of be Immortus. I think that's like the closest version I could see of, the comic book character. Is like, I'd say he's closest to Immortus, but even then, he's pretty much just like Immortus, if I'm not mistaken, from the comics, is more in line of like, it's less so to like save the whole universe, and it's more really just to save himself. Like, this guy seemed like, he did some bad stuff, the TVA pruning people and all that stuff, but it seemed like he really was at the end like, hey, we're all bad guys, but I'm literally only doing this because the entire multiverse will fight. Like, it's the only way I can pretty much protect us is by doing these very specific things. So I know it's bad, and yeah, I effed up your life, and I kind of effed up yours when you went off course. I understand, that's my bad. But I'm saving us from a whole war of the entire multiverse. Immortus was more just like, I kind of just want to be the best Kang. Like, all the other Kangs, I don't want to be more powerful than me. So it's like, he's closest to Immortus, but ultimately still a little bit better. It is what it is. It's shades of gray, I guess. But I like how they handled it. I thought it was cool. Like, it was a huge exposition dump, which I was fine with. I mean, they had as many questions as this show had. It was like, yeah, you got to talk a bit. And it was fine. So we get all the talking, we get the cool little black marble with the gold running through it tech, and I thought that was great. And so he's explaining everything that happened, like the scientist, he found this, and then other versions of the multiverse did all of this. And so it was cool. I like the way they handled it, and then he explains everything that happened, and it's like, and here we are now. So you can either kill me or you can take over. Those are your options. And I was like, this is interesting. Let's see what happens. And he dies at the end. Not much of a surprise there, but I did like the way that it happened. And so Loki and Sylvie kind of going through. Miss Minutes, of course, giant jump scare at the beginning. That was pretty funny. I was like, that it got me. I didn't like jump, but it was definitely the way they did it was clearly meant to be a jump scare because it was super loud too. It wasn't just like she popped up and it was quiet and she was like, hey, and she popped up. She popped up and they added an effect behind her that was like a loud booming effect, and I was like, I think the boom made me jump more than she actually did because I'm like, oh, she popped up, and I was like, okay, she's done that before. And then that loud boom, like almost, it was like just delayed enough to like she popped up, and then the boom was right behind her, and I was like, that's what got me is them just throwing that boom effect in there. So I was like, that was a good one. They definitely got me there. I love this crazy castle. We have like 4 statues, but one of them was destroyed. I'm sure that'll come into play way down the line or time stuff. Who knows? In the future, in the past, somewhere in there, but. They go through. We have Renslayer basically taking off, I assume, to basically just become her comic book counterpart, because in the comic she's the girlfriend of Kang. So she lives and she's like, I'm going off to find free will. And I'm like, I think they're just going to make her kind of in line with the comic book character. So that's actually kind of cool. Owen Wilson does not get his jet ski. He actually ends up being turned into another version of himself who doesn't know who Loki is. That was probably one of the most interesting parts about that whole thing. It wasn't just like, oh, you're a Loki or anything like that. Like, he called him an analyst, which means, I guess in this version, Loki is not nearly, this version of the universe, Loki isn't even that much of an issue, which is unique. So, excuse me. So that brings up a lot of questions for his character in the future, because I'm like, okay, well, does that mean that official Kang just doesn't care about Loki? Did he wipe out all the Lokis except for, Sylvie and our Loki? So it definitely made me question some stuff. I was like, that was like a huge deal, was the fact that Loki wasn't supposed to be there. They didn't deal with working with any Loki variants. It was like, nope, every version of Loki has been pruned, was always an issue. And then he comes up and is like, we did this thing, it's really bad, it's super crazy. And he's just like, hey, slow down, you're an analyst, right? And I was like, Like, I know it, like, the whole point of that was the confusion of him being in a new timeline. But then I was just like, that was a big deal. Like, that was a whole thing about, like, the first episode was like, Lokis are this and Lokis are that. And, the second episode, like, we've done this and all these different versions of Loki. And, like, you're, like they knew everything about Loki because Loki was, like, the greatest timeline, divergent threat that there was. And just over and over again. And for him to have, like, no reaction, I was like, that's interesting. I know they were dealing with a lot because the branches were splitting off. So that was another weird time-based thing, because technically time broke off because Sylvie killed the other version of Kang, and so they were seeing that at the same time as it actually happened. But for them, they'd always lived the life that they lived, and they had no experience of the life we've seen them live throughout the whole season. So time is really weird. Like, her stabbing him is probably during the exact same time as Wanda finding her children, all this timeline stuff, because technically they're outside of time, so they can literally be like, well, they stabbed him at this point. So that's why it takes place, I think it was like 4 months or something later for WandaVision, even though this was 4 days later or something like that, probably a little bit more, but it was basically like a week after Endgame is the season finale for this show. And then for WandaVision, that takes place like 4 months later. And it's interesting. Time is very funny like that. So I'm excited to see what they do. I like the way it was handled. I'm very curious what they're going to do with Sylvie, because I was not expecting them to have their fight. They have their back and forth, and it's like, maybe we should really think about this. And she's lived her whole life. It's like, I lost everything that I had. I've run from apocalypse to apocalypse. All I've seen is death. That's my whole life. He's going down. And Loki has to, they have their back and forth. They finally have their official kiss, and it's like, okay. And then he's gone. It's like, boom, you get out of my face. She kills the dude, and now she's just at the end of time, or in the nexus of time, or something. Kid Loki, he's just out there. Alligator Loki, we got to see them both again. So they're there. They're somewhere. They're somewhere in there. But I'm excited. I thought it was a really great season finale. We got to see who we actually wanted to see. I'm sure somebody's upset that it wasn't Mephisto still, but hey, I think we're past that now. He'll show up. Who knows? Multiverse, Mephisto can easily show up in Doctor Strange. That they might actually do it. It would be really funny, but it would also fit. And they even kind of made a reference to it Actually, in the beginning of this show, when they talk about Nightmare being its own separate department, that's technically the realm that Mephisto does control, which I thought was very interesting. And I was like, is that reference? Had that always been there, or was that just them effing around with the Mephisto thing? Because a lot of people mention that for like the window pane. It was like that wasn't meant to be Mephisto. It's just meant to be like the devil, Loki, and the horns and stuff. It just happened to come after WandaVision, which is just Mephisto. Where's Mephisto? So I don't know. I thought that was interesting. I was like, that's an actual reference to Mephisto. And I think that's probably the one time they actually do anything that's even close to truly referencing Mephisto. Most people probably didn't even realize that's what it was. After all the craziness that we've had with the references or theories about Mephisto, the one time they probably actually referenced it in any of the 3 shows we've had so far, it probably just flew right over most people's head like, oh, Nightmare, that's funny. And it's just gone. So I think that's interesting. But I like the season finale. I'm very excited for when the world could possibly happen with season 2. I think we should expect some new trailers. Like, everybody's waiting on Spider-Man, and I'm like, I think this is very akin to Endgame, where it was like, if you haven't seen Endgame, maybe don't watch this specific Spider-Man trailer. And so I think we might get that again, where they're like, hey, you don't have to technically see it, but it's like, it might be slightly enhanced if you've seen Loki already. So I'm curious. I'm very curious. Because I'm like, okay, with them officially doing this, that makes What If a lot more appealing. And What If even has its most recent trailer show that it's not just a bunch of random stories. Those stories do seem to be connected. They showed a couple of the heroes actually teaming up. And I'm like, I doubt those are just 30-minute episodes. Or even if they're hour-long episodes, I doubt that's what that is, where they just meet up and team up for an hour-long episode. They could do that, and it would be very simple. But I'm like, I don't think that's it. I think they're kind of going into an actual story with What If, and it's its own separate universe. It's not just a bunch of different timelines, all are different, multiverses. It's actually just one multiverse, and the What If is just, well, what if this thing, and then all those things are within What If. So I'm excited. I think it'll be really fun, and they might be doing some stuff. They might find some real easy ways to bring some people back to life, because everybody wanted Killmonger, but now if you have a good Killmonger, just pluck him from the show, plop him right into live action. It's like, well, we have Killmonger, same character, just a good guy. It does change a huge fundamental part of his character, but still people wanted him, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I'm very excited. This is a great way to end the season. I love the freaking music for this show. It's the first theme, I think, in all of Star Wars, in all of the MCU that actually appeals to me, where I'm just like, that really stands out. I can't think of anything else outside of the main theme. And the actual song that plays, which doesn't really count as a theme. I guess maybe it does if you count as Peggy and Steve's theme, love theme or whatever. But that song that plays, that and the actual MCU overall theme are the 2 songs I remember from anything in the MCU. And now we officially have Loki. So that song is great. Well, a couple of the songs are actually great, really. So we'll see what happens in season 2. But I thought this was a really good way to end things out. I'm okay with the cliffhanger, because even when I thought it was the end of the season, end of the series, and I was just like, what the F are they going to do next? I figured it would clearly go into, the movies, but the fact that it's going into an actual season 2, I still think it's going to take place after the film. So I think for everyone that saw the films, Loki's going to show up again in the movies, and we'll have that explanation. Like I said, they'll just have to throw in the TVA and give a boom, it's summarized. So we'll see what happens, but I'm like, this should be fun. It should be pretty fun. I'm sure at some point Owen Wilson will get his jet ski. They're going to put a wow in there somewhere. They didn't do it in season 1 because they knew they could save it for the series finale. He was going to be on that jet ski, and it's like, oh, wow. It'll happen, for sure. It has to happen. It has to. But I really enjoyed it. Of course, we'd love to know what you all thought about the season finale, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, least favorite parts about it. And, of course, with us going into an actual season 2, how do you think that's going to end up playing out? I think we have a couple of movies before that ends up happening, so it'll be interesting to see. I think the movies will tie into what ends up happening in Loki, and he may or may not show up. I think he's going to be in the Multiverse of Madness. I think they've confirmed that at this point, so that'll be really cool. Who knows if Sylvie will show up? That's the really interesting thing. I'm curious if they're saving her for the series, or if they're going to end up throwing her into the movies as well. That might be throwing in too many people to add both Loki and Sylvie, and the whole complication. They need to have almost an hour-long conversation within themselves just talking about what she did after throwing him away. So it's kind of I don't think she'll be in the movie, But then it would be interesting to see where she ends up landing. Like, does she just stay in the castle by herself? Does she hop out into the multiverse now that she has like, you know, he who remains, like she has like his little wrist gauntlet, which is basically the super advanced version of the time pads. So I'm curious what they're gonna do with her character. If she'll show up in the movies, maybe she will, maybe she won't. Who knows? But definitely a great season finale. So like I said, we'll love to know what you guys thought about it. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.